Welcome to 100 Yards of Football. If you like the video today, please come in and share it. We'll surely appreciate it here on 100 Yards of Football. I'd like to give special thanks to my producer who's making it happen this morning, the very talented guy in social media, Mr. Jeremiah Long. I'm your host, Vincent Turner. Today's video is our NFL draft pick of the past in his moment, Mr. John Riggins / Washington Redskins and the New York Jets. If you like the video, please come in and share it. We surely appreciate it here on 100 Yards Football. John Riggins, they call him the Diesel. What a football player. I consider him old school because he was the type of gentleman, even though he had sprinter speed, he was a guy that ran the football like you did back in the backyards back in the day. I'm coming at you. I'm bringing everything to you. Can you handle it? That was John Riggins. I remember John Riggins played football at the University of Kansas. My first knowledge of John Riggins when I was 9 years old, I used to watch the Orange Bowl. It was the last game on New Year's Eve. And I remember Kansas playing Penn State. And I remember the commentators kept mentioning John Riggins. And the only players that I knew from Kansas was really Gary Sayers. And I said, I'm kind of going to follow John Riggins and see how his career goes. Then in the 1971 NFL draft, you had Jim Plunkett out of Stanford that went number 1 overall. You had Archie Manning. I know a lot about Archie Manning because he played at Ole Miss. Dan Pastorini went to Houston. Archie Manning, went to the New Orleans Saints. Then you had J.D. Hill out of Arizona State that went to the Buffalo Bills. Then you had Richard Harris, who's a very talented defensive end out of SWAC by way of Eddie Robinson, Grambling State University. Then the New York Jets took John Riggins, number 6 in the first round of the 71 draft. And then I said to myself, he's going to be teaming up with Broadway Joe Namath, to Chinchilla Colt, who had just won the Super Bowl in 1969. Well, Mr. Riggins played 5 years with the Jets, but he played fullback. And at that time, Mr. Riggins came very, very upset because they weren't using him as a running back. And then in 76, he was traded to the Washington Redskins. In his first few years under George Allen, he didn't run the football. But then a young man, assistant from the San Diego Chargers, Joe Gibbs, knew what to do with him. And then you look what happened in John Riggins' later part of his career. He ended up rushing for almost 11,352 yards, 104 rushing touchdowns. He had 250 receptions for 2,090 yards, 12 touchdowns. He had 35 100-yard games. But this is what big-time players do when big-time money comes along. They rise to the occasion. In the postseason, Mr. John Riggins went over 996 yards, 12 touchdowns. And then in 1983, at 36 years old, he had 1,347 rushing yards and 24 touchdowns. A Hall of Famer. And when you look at the skill set of John Riggins, and I was a Dallas Cowboys fan and still a Dallas Cowboys fan to this day, I didn't like John Riggins, but I knew this. He was a guy that got up for the Dallas Cowboys. His skill set, he was like a cannon on the field, A+. Came to play every game, A+. Never took a play off, A+. Workhouse as a ball carrier, A+. As I just mentioned, 11,352 yards in his career. The very determined football player. What I say by that, in his first few years in the league when he was in the New York Jets, he played fullback, never touched the football, blocking back. And then he moved to tailback when he was traded to the Washington Redskins. Then he was the guy that had power as a running back, A+. He had glory to run over you, A+. As I just mentioned, his blocking skills were off the charts, A+. Run instincts, A+. Now, this is the key part right here that made him so tough. Yards after contact. You hit John Riggins, you better bring your lumber and you better wrap up, because if you didn't, he was going to break that tackle and take it coast to coast. Then the balance he had as a running back, A+. the vision, the ability to cut into the hole. He didn't have a lot of ability as far as vision, but once he saw that hole, he was bringing it to the linebacker. And most of all, he was mentally tough, A+. John Riggins was one of the better football players that played old school back in the mid-70s. He was that thing that carried the Washington Redskins to the playoffs. Then in 1983, he had 24 touchdowns, the most that was scored at that time, which was an NFL record, until Emmitt Smith broke it. And as I said before, in 1982, when the Washington Redskins won the Super Bowl in their strike-shortened season, he had 4 consecutive games which he went over 100 yards in the playoffs. But his greatest moment and his biggest moment, I never forget. I was at 1248 Singing Trees in Memphis, Tennessee, where my parents, Chester and Inez Turner, lived. And we had a lot of people watching the Super Bowl, watching that game that day. I was a 22-year-old, just graduated from the University of Arkansas. And man, I was pulling for the Miami Dolphins. I'm not going to tell you no lie because I didn't like the Redskins at the time. But John Riggins' biggest moment, that 43-yard run, the play called 70 chip. He hit that hole. Don McNeil out of the University of Alabama corner came up, tried to meet John Riggins. John Riggins broke that tackle and took it 43 yards to the house. And all you can say is, in the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, the Washington Redskins are going to win this game. And they beat the Miami Dolphins 27-17. And John Riggins was the Super Bowl MVP. 38 carries that game, 166 yards. That was his greatest moment in his great story career. John Riggins, the Diesel. And he was a character too. If you like the video today, please come in and share it. We surely appreciate here at 100 Yards of Football. I'd like to give special thanks one more time to my producer and my social media guy and the one who's the best in the business, Mr. Jeremiah Long. I'm Vincent Turner. Hail to the Redskins and hail to this young man that's on the screen right now. Good-looking guy, Mr. John Riggins. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. Hail to the Redskins. Dun, 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 dun. Y'all be blessed here on 100 Yards of Football.